Hey, Clayton, I got one more question for you.
Shoot.
Do you have any lab assays, analysis on the what's coming out of the body, like hair analysis, blood, urine, after taking this product, before and after?
Well, that'd be a really good thing to look at, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Well, let's do that real quick. So let's go back here. Let's go to share, because we've done this once before, but we'll go here. And this is always the fun stuff to show. Well, and I'll protect some names to protect the innocent, because you can see some names here, but we won't use those. So don't mind them. We'll look at this one.
And as you're looking, does any of your labs show what particulates are actually coming out? What metals?
Yeah, it's in there.
Are you trying to lead me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
But without the lead.
Sorry.
I'm leading you without the lead.
So this is what we like to do is pre-provocation and post-provocation. The provocation aspect is using our little friend. But you can use anything. You can use water or whatnot. So the baseline analysis that we do, if someone chooses to do this, and I have a really good relationship with a lab, these guys that give me great discounts on lab testing. So if you want to have a pre and a post done, or longitudinal study where you continually do some urine analysis to see what's coming out, you can do that. And I've got 4 or 5 people that we can do more on that are requesting it. But what we want to look at is your baseline. We want to use nothing. So we want you doing your normal process in the morning, and we'll look at what's coming out. So we can look at aluminum through arsenic and cesium and lead and mercury and nickel and platinum and all these other metals. So this was his baseline. This was a 42-year-old guy that knew he was mercury toxic. And so naturally he was excreting a 3.2 for mercury. And what's interesting is when we look at the range and the green levels here for a lot of these metals, whether we look at arsenic, if we look at, say, aluminum, and we look at mercury, and it has the green as the safe level, let's be honest real quick, you and me, as we talk through this, there is no safe level of mercury, period. So we're good on that part, but that's what he was throwing. So we put him on 10 drops twice a day, and we had him do a second collection. And we'll look at the one where there was the big difference. So we'll go back here. So his arsenic levels went from a 21 down to a 15, but his mercury initially was at a 3.2. And this is what he's excreting. This is what's important. We want to look at what's coming out, because what this does is it helps get things out. So we'll focus on this one because it's the worst neurotoxin known to man. It shuts off glutathione production. It shuts off your methylation process, and it's the worst heavy metal known. So after a week, he goes to a 13.8. You can see here. But what's interesting is he had no negatives of throwing that much mercury out of his system. He was getting a lot healthier really, really quickly. And so we went from a 4.2 to a 13.8 in his excretion. That's over 300% increase, 350% increase in excretion of mercury in a week, which is phenomenal. We can use, let me see here.
You have like a 1 month, 3 months, 6 months afterwards?
No, we haven't done those with people, because typically what we're looking at is the short term. And because of the expense of testing, I think over time as a company, as we generate more revenue, I'll have some people, that we'll use as a baseline, and we'll go through some longer testing so we can kind of look at what happens as the onion peels. But typically what we're looking at is a baseline, to see how people are responding to the product and what's working. And does the product work, which we know it does.
You kind of answered my question a little bit, though. What's the actual cost of the test? And what's the type of test? Is it possible you could find a comparable test that would be feasible for us to do as members, have someone test before they start, and then after, again, what's the actual cost of the test around about?
If you go to your doctor, I think they charge about $200, per urine analysis. With Root members, it's about $75 per test. And
that's not too bad.
You do the baseline where you just pee in the cup, and then you do the follow-up. We like to do a week later, because a week gives the product a chance to really start working and allows the body to start really releasing some stuff. But if you have,
I like to see it 6 months out.
Yeah, I know, and that's the fun part for people that want to do it. You can start day one, you can look at a week, and then you do another one in a couple months.
Because if it shows all green, that means it's pretty much out of your system.
Yeah, and you might see some stuff that stay in the green. You'll see other stuff that's coming out. That's the cool part. This was who we got. This is a 58-year-old guy. What's interesting here is he owns a nutritional supplement distribution company, and he's been doing work with a new supplement that he was taking in powdered form, And when I got his results back, I asked him what he'd been doing, and he's like, well, I'm using this powder. I've been using tons of it to test out, how much is beneficial. I'm like, what's the base that you're using for a powder? And he told me they were using rice bran and rice flour, brown rice flour, actually. And what's really important, if you're living the gluten-free lifestyle now, that you don't need to be gluten-free. You need to get rid of the glyphosate. So it's not a gluten issue, it's a glyphosate problem, which is number one, and this removes glyphosate. But step two, rice naturally has an affinity to bind arsenic in the environment. And you can see here with his baseline, he was at a 6.2. And then we had him do 10 drops twice a day for a week, and he's up at a 34.6. So he had 6 to 34 in a week. So 550% increase in his excretion. Barium levels went up, or barium levels came down a little bit. Barium came down, arsenic went up. And when, just asking the simple questions, like, okay, what's the source of that? He's like, I'm using this rice bran flour. I'm like, okay, that's an indicator. Now this is, I'm going to use Drayton because she's one of our community members, and she's given me the clear to do this, but I'll remove her name. And Drayton is one, she's had Hodgkin's lymphoma in the past. And so if you look at non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and leukemia, and you do some research on this, one of the primary causes is arsenic toxicity. And so we look at her baseline. She was at a 6.7. She's been through some treatment. She's been doing okay. She's been on clean slate for a bit. Now she's doing great. But we look at her put her on 10 drops twice a day. And then she goes from a 6.7 here to a 76.7. So that 1100% increase in excretion of arsenic in a week. And what's important to understand as well is that what's coming out of you and what's coming out of an individual will vary between each individual. And as Geyer just asked the question, he says some people do not feel so many changes when using clean slate, but it's still moving the toxins and metals out of your body, without you feeling it. It's absolutely correct. And that's one of the key components of this being passive, right? That because of the cage structure that we were looking at, the cages are actually grabbing onto and binding the metals while they're still in your system. So they get trapped in that cage, and then you just pee them out passively. So through that process, you are passively detoxifying your system, because with heavy metals, with glyphosate, with other environmental toxins, you don't want to make a bunch of, come get knocked loose in your bloodstream and in your system to where your body has to try to flush it all out, because we don't have the mechanisms to do it. So doing it passively, if you're not feeling anything, that's great. You don't feel gravity either, but it's here. It just is. And the product does what it does. So you just have to pay attention to some of the things that are going on in your life, because we're seeing some of the factors that this is acting as a really, really strong anti-inflammatory, that you might see, changes, in your body that, are a direct response to inflammation dissipating and being eliminated. But the things you might not pay attention to. So everybody's a little bit different, but you can't stop this from doing what it does. It's like a magnet, right? A magnet's going to grab onto metals naturally. It just depends on how much ability that magnet has the ability to grab onto and bind, based on its surface area, which is the same mechanism that we use with the fragments. That was a really good question. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any other